Hello and welcome to the launch of the Oxplore Hackathon. I am Dr. Tom Crawford. I'm a mathematician here at the University of Oxford, and you may also recognise me from basically any maths video on YouTube, whether that's my own channel, Tom Rocks Maths, or with Numberphile, the biggest maths channel on YouTube. I'm very excited to be here with you all today, where we will be discussing the question, can we build a better world? We will have a series of interactive polls for you all to take part in and vote in around this question. And we also have a panel of academic experts who will be bringing insights from their own subject and applying them to today's question. And with that interactivity in mind, we're going to kick off the first poll of today. We will have all of the results at the end and we will be discussing those. So you have the whole next sort of 40 minutes or so to get your votes in. But the first one is asking the question, do you think that our actions today can create a better world for the future? So there are two options. Option one is to say that yes, everything we do can make a difference. And option two is no, it's hard to change the whole world. So that should appear on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you click on that and then you can cast your vote. And as I say, we will talk through those results at the end. And on that theme of interactivity, before I introduce our panel, who will each present for around 5 minutes their thoughts on today's question, whilst you're listening, do type into the chat any questions you have. Keep those questions in mind and pop them in that box, and they will come through to me on my computer, and then I will share them with the panel once each of them has had a chance to present their thoughts. But you can obviously get your questions in as soon as they come to mind, get them in the chat, they'll be fed through to me, and then we'll all discuss them later. And do let me know your name, your school, where you're coming from, because it's always nice to give you all a bit of a shout out as well. So that brings me to our first panelist. So first up, we have Harriet McKinley-Smith, who is going to be approaching the question from the subject, from the angle of arts and literature. Harriet.
Hi. So I'm Harriet, and I'm a doctoral student at Oxford. And today we're going to be having a chat about how the arts and literature make the world a better place. You know, things like stories and cool stuff that can make us think and connect with the world. I think it's pretty cool, at least. So let's start with how arts and stories make us feel for others. So think about your favourite novel. Odds are it's about more than just the plot, right? If we take the Harry Potter series, for example, you know, everyone knows that. It's not just about wizards, it's about friendship, about standing up for what's right, and understanding people who are different from us. I mean, it's like we kind of get a backstage pass to other people's lives. We can learn from their behaviour, and it really helps us to think more deeply about the world around us. So, picture this. You're looking at a painting, and it makes you question everything around you. That's what Banksy's street art does. It's not just paint on a wall, it's a message about society, making us think about things like fairness, the earth, and society. So if you take the picture on the screen, for example, this is the girl with a balloon. So in this artwork, you can see a girl is reaching for this red-shaped balloon, flying away. It can seem really simple, but it's a really important message about how innocent moments can slip away and how some people have a hard time chasing their dreams, is one interpretation. So this painting gets us talking about the complicated stuff in our world, and it really makes you think. So on my next slide, so storytelling through things like music can really help us come together. So if you take the music of the Beatles, for example, their songs have a way of uniting people from all walks of life. All You Need Is Love, for example, is a simple message, but it speaks to everybody. Music helps to create a community of listeners and fans. So if you look at Taylor Swift's concerts and the friendship bracelets fans are giving around to each other, the music becomes a way of meeting like-minded people across all of the generations, and you know that's really important. So Arts and stories aren't just fun, they can teach us stuff too. So if we think about David Attenborough's documentaries, for example, they not only show us the wonders of the natural world, but also make us aware of important things like taking care of our planet. You might think, hang on, this is not art or literature, but science. But I would argue that it's simultaneously art and science. So you have cinematography, for example. Think about the beautiful images that we are shown and the way that the stories are woven together. It is science, but it's also art, and this is really what helps to create change. I don't know if any of you are watching Planet Earth 3 at the moment, but every single episode has an important story that makes us think about climate change and our relationship to nature. My next example is from real life. So the Black Lives Matter movement gained momentum with powerful art and literature. For instance, consider the striking artwork created during protests, like the murals of George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. These impactful paintings, along with powerful writing, raised awareness and sparked conversations about racial injustice. It's possible to use the literature and the arts as a vehicle for your message, just like how these artworks became a powerful voice for advocating for change and equality. So just to sum up, arts and literature make the world better. They make us think, feel and connect, whether it's through Hogwarts, Banksy's art, the Beatles' music or Attenborough's documentaries. They really leave a mark on us, and this is why I think art can really help to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet.
Thanks.
Very interesting. I have many questions that I want to throw at you, but before I get my chance to ask questions for Harriet, of course, let us know your questions. As I said, put those in the chat and we will have a discussion about those in about 15 minutes or so. But it's also time for our second poll, inspired by exactly what Harriet has been discussing. So hopefully that is now appearing on screen for you. So this one asks the question, do you think drawing and writing stories can help people to understand big problems better? So option 1 is yes, they make it easier to see what's wrong, or option 2, no, they're just for fun. So get your votes in and we will again talk about those later. But I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things you said, because they really resonated with me individually. Because first of all, you mentioned about David Attenborough, and you said about Planet Earth 3, which I haven't watched yet, but I'm glad you reminded me it's now out. I remember the Blue Planet series, sort of maybe a decade ago, also David Attenborough, and that there were all of these images of wildlife in the ocean being trapped in plastic and plastic bags. And I think one of the main reasons that we then decided to charge people for plastic bags in shops was kind of off the back of the campaign from these kinds of images in Blue Planet. So I just thought that was a really nice example of what you were saying, where like a piece of art like actually led to sort of societal change.
Exactly, yeah. And it's so, like I was saying, people think that documentaries are just about science, but it really is the stories that are told that can help to create change.
Absolutely. Just because I want to mention that I was very fortunate to go and see Taylor Swift. I remember getting my friendship bracelet, and then afterwards meeting an entirely separate group of people outside on the street, and we were just immediate friends. Yeah. Because we were all wearing the same bracelets and we had that connection. Exactly. So yeah, no, I thought it was fascinating, and as I said, there was particular things that jumped out at me, sort of from a personal perspective from what you were talking about. Okay, so moving on to our second speaker. So we have Tianqi Wang, who will be talking about artificial intelligence and how that subject can sort of be brought to our big question. So Tianqi.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tianqi and I am studying zoology at the University of Oxford. But today I will be talking about AI and robots. And here on my slide you can see a very beautiful image created by an AI artist. And I have two other pictures here, again created by our wonderful AI artists when I asked them to please help me draw something about AI and robot. And obviously this is AI's understanding about itself. As you can see, it's quite interesting. On one of the images, it's two robots talking to each other. On the other one, it's AI talking to human, presumably. And on the last one is just one robot. And besides creating images, AI nowadays can do many other powerful things. For example, it can generate human voice. It's quite a dangerous thing to do, actually. And it also can extract human voice from environmental background, noisy background. It can separate human voice from music tracks. Another thing is about videos. AI can generate videos or modify videos. Again, it's quite dangerous if you use them in the wrong way. And another one, it is capable of doing, and one of the most famous examples nowadays is probably ChatGPT. I'm not so sure, have you heard about it? Have you used it already? But it's basically, it's an AI that can chat with you, and this is my conversation with ChatGPT when I know that I'm going to be a guest here talking about AI and robot, and I asked it, what do you think? And as it should be, it told me that I'm not supposed to have a personal opinion, but here's what I know about AI and robots. And I think it's blocked by the arrow on the slide, but it said that robots and AI can be quite beneficial for educational work. So it's definitely helping us making a better future. And like I said, I do zoology. I'm not actually a robot expert, but still I use AI for my own work. So it's helping me as a student. You can see on the right of the screen, there's a guppy fish. Don't worry, it's not dead, it's just sleeping. We need to measure the body length of the guppy fish every month to track the growing pattern of each individual fish. And so on the top of this picture, you can see there's a label. There's a handwritten line, which is the ID for the fish, so that we can track every individual fish. And it's handwritten, and we want to get that information from the label. And obviously I can do it myself. I can click on the picture, I can read it, I can write it down on my computer. It will probably just take less than 10 seconds if I'm really good at this. But we have 500,000 pictures in total. And if I work 24 hours a day, don't do anything else, I will probably use about 50 days to get all the information I need. But we have a very powerful AI developed by one of my colleagues who is a robot expert. And this is part of the things that the AI can do. It can read and extract the text from the image so that you can see that it's reading the label like a human. Not much faster, actually. It takes about 7 seconds for the AI to process the image. But it gets things done. And while my computer is running 40 days in a row, I can be sleeping, I can be eating, I can be having fun, enjoying myself, and of course doing more important work as well. But it's saving me lots of time, and for me, that's definitely making my world much, much better. So I believe that AI and robots can help make this world a better place. And thank you for listening.
Tanji, thank you. Very interesting. So you mentioned there the useful aspects of AI that you're using in your own research with the fish. Now, I want to talk a bit more about your experience with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So how have you interacted with it much, and how have you actually found that experience? Because I found it's terrible at doing maths. I think it's a fantastic piece of software and an incredible artificial intelligence, but when I ask it to do maths questions, it's not very good.
Really?
I know, it surprised me as well. So I'm intrigued as to, have you interacted with it and found things that you've noticed it's good at, it's bad at? What has been your experience with ChatGPT? Because I think that's probably the thing most of you watching, have interacted with as an AI. So how have you found it?
I'm quite surprised to learn that it's bad at math, because I thought that would be it would be better at math than compared to more of the lingual aspect, because I've tried the lingual aspect and it's not working as good as I thought it might be. But it's definitely very helpful. Sometimes I do coding myself as well, and sometimes it's very helpful when I cannot debug myself and I just put one line in, see what's the problem. Oh, you're missing one comma. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, no, the maths thing, I agree, it completely surprised me. So I think it does point out an important lesson, or maybe flaw, I guess, in current artificial intelligence, is that it's not yet you shouldn't take everything it says to be true necessarily, right? Which I think is important for us all to remember as we begin to interact with these things more and more. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And that brings us to our third and final speaker on the panel. So Simon Barnes-Sadler is going to talk about our big question, can we build a better world from the perspective of language? So Simon.
Thank you, and hello. So, how do we make a better world? I think that we make a better world by understanding each other better. And as someone who has spent a very long time learning languages and thinking about how they work in general, the way that I would do that is by learning lots more languages. My reasoning being that if we can all speak to each other in our respective languages, then we'll understand each other a lot better. This is really hard though. So on this map you can see the different colours representing all the different language families of the world. That's groups of languages that are similar to each other, and there's a few dozen of those. But we have about 6,500 individual languages in the world. I mean, that's a lot to learn. And even if you learn the 10 languages with the most native speakers, you're still not going to be able to understand more than half of the people in the world when they speak to you in their native language. That's something that you can see here. So in that circle on the right, the whole circle is the entire population that speaks the 10 most widely spoken languages natively. We've divided it up so you can see the population of speakers. But when we look at that circle on the left, we can see that when you add all those people together, it's about 3 some billion people. That's far less than half of the whole population of the world. And even when we do look at the languages on the right, just those top 10, we've got things like Vietnamese, Japanese, Bengali, and Russian and Spanish. They're all really, really different. We can have different sounds, different words, different rules for putting those words together, putting them in different orders. And this makes it really hard to learn so many languages. And of course, we can write them all down in different ways. So, because I'm a little bit soppy, here is the word for love in lots of different languages. I'm sure there are a few words that you can see that you recognize, some that you can read, maybe some that you sort of recognize but can't read, and some that are completely new to you. So it really is a hard problem, learning so many languages. I had a little bit more of a think about this though, and I realized that there was a problem with my reasoning. I said at the very beginning that we can build a better world by understanding each other better. And language is a big part of that, but it's not the only part of that. And thinking like that makes me want to share a little bit of my research with you. So, a little while ago, I went to make some recordings and to document, which is, I guess, collecting word lists and some facts about grammar for something that is either a language that's related to Korean or a dialect, a special type of Korean, and we are still arguing about that. And while I was doing that, to begin with, it was pretty difficult to speak to the people I was working with. It was difficult to communicate with them. But that wasn't us understanding each other. It was much more the sort of work we did together on something that was meaningful for them, that helped us understand each other, and the personal connections that we could forge there. And I don't really know if the work that I did on the language made the work better, but I do know that that kind of interpersonal understanding did make the world better. So, there are a couple of things that I'd like you to take away from this as you approach the question of how to make the world better. First is try to ask some really difficult questions about the first idea you come up with, and any other idea you come up with, really. Ask if it's really going to address the question you want it to. Try and picture really clearly how it's going to make the world better, and also maybe ask whose world it's going to make better too. The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is don't forget the small things. I mean, there are plenty of big questions that do demand big answers, but small things can be very meaningful. They can have great big meanings for people. And also, when you add all of the small things up, they can have very big changes too. So Thank you so much.
Simon, thank you. So before I forget, because I forgot last time, let's do your poll and then we'll come back and we'll do the one on artificial intelligence. So as Simon has just been talking about language, we will now open up the poll for you based on Simon's very interesting presentation. So the question this time is learning a new language a superpower for making friends around the world? Option 1 is yes, it's like a magic key to new friendships. Or option 2, no, it's not that important for making friends. So Simon, just to follow up on what you were saying, something that immediately came to my mind when you mentioned this kind of building of connection, perhaps where you don't understand the language that somebody else is speaking. So do you have any examples or maybe like tips for people who may be watching this, who maybe are interacting with somebody and they don't speak the same language? How can you help to build that connection between them if you actually, the words aren't there, how else can you try to build that connection?
So I would say you can really pay active attention to whoever you're talking to. I think you'll get a cue from all sorts of almost universal bits of body language, whether someone's comfortable or uncomfortable, and just take your cue from there. Don't be afraid to get things wrong as well. I think you can try something, and if that doesn't work, then don't try it again.
Awesome, thank you. And whilst the other polls will remain open, I will now remember to open our other poll based on artificial intelligence from Tianqi's discussion earlier. So this final poll question asks, should we use more robots and computer programs to help us learn in school? So option 1 is yes, they can make learning more fun, or option 2, no, they might be too distracting. So that now gives you 4 polls to cast your votes in. We again will come back to the results of those at the end, and we will discuss them as a panel and see what we all make of it, see what we all make of your opinions. But now we actually will open up the whole panel to our Q&A session. So I can see I've already got a few questions that have come in from everyone watching, but as we are discussing, please do continue to feed your questions into the chat, send them in, let us know your name, your school, so I can share those questions with our panel. So I guess where to begin? Okay, this is an interesting one for you, Harriet, actually, which I quite like, which says, what about people who think that graffiti makes the world worse? What makes Banksy's work okay compared to other sort of graffiti?
That's really interesting. And I suppose it depends on what you view as art. I mean, art is a very personal thing. So I guess it's a personal response. So I think, yeah, it's up to you whether you think it's art or not. So think about it from that perspective, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And more of a personal question from me. Do you have a favourite Banksy piece? Or was it the one that you showed?
The one that I showed, yeah. that was my favourite. Obviously, I had to choose my favourite.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, now, Tianqi, so we have a question here about your research on guppies, which is asking, how was this research done before AI was developed? So would it actually be done by hand and take 40 days, as you were saying?
They probably did it month by month. It would take the same amount of time, but it doesn't feel that much when they just write these labels down and then do it when they release the fish and have nothing else to do. Of course, they have loads of other things to do as well. But if we do it month by month, then it would save much time. We don't need to work 40 days in a row.
Mm-hmm. And just as a follow-up to that, I guess, is there a specific question you're trying to answer about the guppies when you're doing this research? Sort of you're more putting your zoology hat back on. What sort of specific things are you looking to investigate and answer?
We call them life history traits. So it's basically many different traits that we're tracking. We're seeing whether their body size is getting larger or smaller. We're seeing whether the lifespan is getting longer or shorter, and are they getting smarter by not letting us to find them and catch them so easily?
Awesome. And then Simon, a question for you, which says the following. Is it easier for people to understand each other if their languages are very similar e.g. Italian and Spanish?
I'm going to be mean and pick you up on that word understand. So it's definitely easier to communicate that way. And it's possible that you'll be able to sort of pick out some words and get a global sense of what's being said. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be able to understand each other. For example, well, people who speak different varieties of English, communication tends not to be a problem between, say, someone who speaks British English and US English or Australian English. But sometimes the understanding can be a bit of an issue.
Yes, awesome. And then I guess following up from that then, are there any sort of, I guess, languages that you found yourself are slightly easier to learn as a English? Potentially incorrectly, I'm going to assume you're an English native speaker.
Yes,
so like which languages, are there any ones that you found there's quite a lot of similarities that you found easier to learn versus any others that are very difficult and feel very different?
So I would say that definitely the sort of geographically nearer languages, things like German and French and Spanish are a little bit easier, I think, to get into. But for me, the thing that makes a language easiest to learn is having a reason to learn it. As soon as you have a good reason, then suddenly the rest follows pretty easily.
I agree. Okay, we got a question here from Calderstone School. Hello, Calderstone School. Thank you for your question. Thank you for putting your name on the question. So I think this is probably for yourself, Tianqi, which is to say, do you think in the future there will be any jobs that an AI could not do?
Oh, I have to be honest with you. I personally think no.
So you think everything will eventually be automated and performed?
Yeah, I know there's a spectrum of different opinions on AIs and robots, and I'm towards one of the ends. And yeah, I think I might be wrong, but my prediction for the future is that they can replace us in every way.
Okay, well then I'm going to throw this open to the panel now. Actually, Simon wants to jump in already.
Ooh.
Gosh. What would that end up doing? Do we get to live a life of leisure and let the AIs get on with everything productive? That sounds quite nice.
There are definitely drawbacks to risks to doing that as well. I mean, my feeling is that they can learn everything, but it's not necessary. I use the word replacing, but it's not necessary about replacing us. There's definitely a way of mutual development, but I do believe that they can learn everything, because when I think about the way our brains work and the way we create these AIs and robots, again, it's just my personal opinion. I might be wrong.
No, of course, don't worry about having an opinion. We want all of you watching this to develop your opinions, hopefully with the insights that we're trying to provide. It's definitely an interesting opinion. And then Harriet, what about from your perspective, discussing about arts and literature?
Well,
do you think that's something that an artificial intelligence could actually replicate?
I mean, I'm not an expert, but I would say no, because, so correct me if I'm wrong, so AI learns from everything you put into it. So ChatGPT, it learns from every single question or every piece of writing you put in. So it only learns from what human experience it has received. And then to say that it can't, I mean, I don't know. I think you can't replicate human experience, and everything is always changing. So to say that it could replace, I don't know, for example, writing, stories, it can't have seen every possible story that could ever happen. So how could it replace everything?
Well, I actually think that's the thing that AI is doing much better than what we can, because it can read potentially every single book on this planet, but we cannot as a human. It learns a different language so much easier than what we can do.
But what about the differences in human experience? So, it might not understand every single person's perspective. People have new experiences. It might not necessarily know about the new experiences.
But we gain our experience through learning as well, and we learn through what we read, what we see, what we experience, what people say to us. And AI, I kind of feel that they will be, or they are already learning things in a very similar way, if not the same way.
Interesting. I disagree, but anyway.
Okay, so I can see there's a question here for me from Calderstone School. Was that the school that just asked a question? I think it was. Well, I'll allow you to ask a second question because I just got distracted because you've asked me what my favourite Pokemon is. So a good way to always distract me. My favourite Pokemon is Butterfree. And we will leave it at that. But no, thank you for the question. So we do have another one from a different school. Where did I find it? Here it is. So I think this one is for you, Simon, from the Belvedere Academy. Hello, Belvedere Academy. Thank you for tuning in, sending your question in. So they've asked, is it more important to understand someone's language or their culture?
Wow, good question, Belvedere Academy. So I think that there isn't really a way of separating the two. Often you will find a lot of culture in a given language. So let me give you an example. The language that I specialize in right now is Korean. And in order to speak Korean successfully, you need to really think your way into the culture, because every sentence that you make has to have some cultural content. There is a little piece of grammar that you put at the end of the sentence that explains how you relate to the people you're talking to. And you have to make that judgment not based on how you would feel as an English speaker or a Chinese speaker or a Welsh speaker or anything else, but how you would do that as a Korean speaker, someone embedded in that culture. So for me, I think there's not really a way of separating language and culture.
Yeah, I mean, when I asked you the question, I felt like adding a third category of or both. So I felt like it was, it's always going to be aspects of both of them, definitely. Okay, another one for you, Harriet. So, can art and literature be used for evil as well as for good?
That's
So I think a lot of, you gave us lots of very nice examples, but I felt a lot of them were sort of talking about change in like what we might perceive in a positive way.
Yeah.
So could it also be flipped on its head and used in negative ways?
I mean, yeah, I guess it can. Art is what you make it, and if you have evil intentions while you're doing it, I guess, well, yeah, sure.
Or even, I suppose, from the example you gave of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are evil characters in Harry Potter, so it does make me wonder. I think most people perhaps take away the good and, as you said, the friendships, the acceptance of other people.
Yeah.
But it is just an interesting thought. I think it's a very good question, actually, as to, of course, those evil themes are being addressed in the book as well.
Yeah.
So it possibly you could take something away from that in a negative way, I suppose. But maybe it depends on how you're feeling when you're reading the book and you're...
Yeah. No, that's true, I think, yeah. You take from literature, like I was saying, it's about your personal experience. And I suppose you take from the literature what you want to take from it. So if you're in a bad mood, maybe you might take the bad things from it. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's important to be aware that it can influence you in negative ways as well as positive, I guess, is, I would argue, is perhaps the key thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Right, St. Cuth... No, I've done them. Lots of questions coming in, hard to keep track. Sacred Heart Catholic School in Camberwell. Hello, Sacred Heart Catholic School. So their question is, how can you ensure people don't abuse the power of AI? For example, using it to help you learn something rather than make it do it for you. Homework comes to mind. This sounds like a teacher question. This is a teacher basically saying, how can we tell the students to not use artificial intelligence to do their homework? So I can say from a maths perspective, ChatGPT is rubbish at maths, so I do not recommend that. But Tenchi, do you have any thoughts on that? So how can we ensure people don't abuse the power of AI?
If it's only on an individual level, I would say probably it's the moral principles that's helping us doing the self-control things. But if it's on a society level, education, we need the power of art and all the good things, again, to build the moral principles to... It can go wrong. There are several examples I've mentioned, AI-generated things. It can go wrong in a very easy way, and it's really dangerous if it go wrong in that direction. And there's definitely risk, but I still believe that all the benefits comes with risks. If we don't see that there's also dark side, there's potential harm, we cannot really proceed and accept the development and embrace the benefits it can bring us.
And on the question of homework, teachers, I would argue to the students who may be watching this that whilst it might be a nice shortcut to get your homework done for you by an AI, you will not actually learn anything. And so further down the line, you will unfortunately face the consequences of not actually learning it. So that would be my perspective on that question as a teacher myself. Now sort of a question, and this is actually from me, just kind of, I guess, perhaps for all of you, is around this question of artificial intelligence. Because a lot of the questions that are coming in, people seem very keen to discuss this. So I wonder whether we could think about it from the perspective of the disciplines that you've each presented. And perhaps, Chenchi, you can talk about it from a zoology perspective, in the sense of, given artificial intelligence is here to stay, it would appear, how do you think, from the perspective of your subject, we could harness its power to help to build a better world? So in terms of art and literature, in terms of languages, how can you see the benefits of artificial intelligence to, let's focus on the positives? Does that sort of make sense for everyone? Okay, so does anyone have any?
I mean, I am kind of the perspective that, there's always a human element to art and literature. So I would always say, I would not use it, but from that perspective. But if I were to use it, for example, in my research, when you're, looking for book chapters or, supporting evidence for something you're writing, it can be useful to search what's out there. But I think it's more about how you use it rather than getting it to do it for you. Any experience that I've had with ChatGPT, it comes out with, I might be using it wrong, but it comes out with utter nonsense. It uses 5 words instead of 2. So I think there's always that element of your own personal writing style, be it fiction, non-fiction, artwork. I've never personally used it for art, but I think there's something about a brush stroke that you can do with your hand that you can't replicate. That would just be my perspective. I don't approve, but I understand that it is here to stay, but it would be my choice to stick with, human elements of my subject.
Okay, I think that's fair. Simon, did you have any?
Sure. So thinking especially about language learning, we can use it kind of like an online dictionary or machine translator, but with a bit more. So something that we've actually been playing with in language classes here is showing ChatGPT, for example, text, and then asking it what a particular word means in the context of that text. And it's been relatively successful at explaining it in a way that is sort of more useful, more relevant to that text than just looking it up in a dictionary or throwing it onto Google Translate or whatever might be for a student. So this is an interesting avenue to pursue, maybe, from language learning.
And then what about from the zoology perspective?
I've given my example, and I know there are other researchers using it in a similar way for extracting. Like I said, we also extract the body lens data from the same image. It's a different AI, it's a different program, and there are also many medical researchers are also using AI for their analysis. I cannot think of a very good example now, but it's helping us treat the patients better. And also with the computing skills and the data set, we can do better. AI is also very good for personalized learning and treatment and everything.
So I want to sort of bring us to one of the polls and the sort of poll results that we have, because I've just scrolling through, I've noticed there's a very interesting result that's come in. So on the first poll that we asked, and I want to give us all an opportunity to discuss this. The first poll that we asked was, do you think our actions today can create a better world for the future? And everybody has said yes. which I think is very good to see that no one has given up yet. We're all feeling optimistic that we can do this. So I just thought I would throw that question open to the panel to see if you have any insights around that. And again, if you want to, it can either be your own personal opinion or whether you want to bring in the element from your subject area. But sort of to discuss this question of, do you think our actions today can create a better world for the future?
Well, I definitely think yes, because I mean, even if we go back to the David Attenborough documentary that I was talking about, you know, we've seen the impact of, I mean, it's not my discipline, it's, you know, maybe more closer to yours with zoology, but the effects that our actions have on the planet, for example, we've had negative effects, and now our actions today, like when you mentioned the plastic bag tax, or whatever you want to call it, we can improve from that. So I guess the more we learn, the more we know how to improve for the future. So yeah, definitely, for sure, we can do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Simon?
Absolutely. So we've got, even in language studies, we've got these examples of how we've taken action and led to a better tomorrow, which is now today. So, for example, languages are currently disappearing at an alarmingly fast rate, and many are still endangered. But we have success stories for languages like, say, Welsh or Maori in New Zealand, or Hawaiian in Hawaii. People have taken action and chosen to put real effort into documenting and saving these languages. And it's paying off. They're surviving, these languages. So there seems to be good evidence that we can make a difference for a better future.
Absolutely. Chenji?
Yeah, and I also think we can make a better future, and I love seeing the positive results.
Yes.
And we are young, we're hopefully doing some positive things for planet Earth, and they're younger than us. It's really good to see that they have this really positive mindset and very positive predictions about the future.
Yes. Yeah, I think sometimes it can feel a bit doom and gloom, right, I think, with some of the things. So I'm very, very glad to see. That's why it struck me when I was scrolling down and I saw this 100%. So thank you for being positive and optimistic, everybody. I think we're all in agreement. Like, our panel have shared various examples from their own subject areas where we've made changes and things have developed for the better. So I think that is an important message to take away from today's discussion. Okay, I've been... This question has come through many times. I probably should have asked this earlier. So it's related to your work, Tenchi, about the students at Holmley Park. Hello, Holmley Park. They would like to know, can the fish actually sleep, and how can you tell? I think they're quite worried about that these fish are being well looked after. So can you clear that one up for us?
We used a special, I can't remember the name though. We used the thing to put them to sleep for only very few minutes. And we need to be really quick at taking those photos for all the individual fish. And it's quite interesting experience. And I have to admit, we probably accidentally harmed less than 50 fish in all the 500,000 pictures while they were taken. But we did not reach a 100% success rate in that, but it's relatively harmless. We can see the lifespan for some of the individuals actually going up, so it's not doing obvious harm to them, at least.
Good to know. So hopefully that alleviates any fears that anyone had about those fish. So there's a question now. I think it's a bit more of a general question, but I think it does tie in very nicely to this, what we're discussing about how can we build a better world, or can we build a better world. So this is again from Sacred Heart Catholic School, who've asked, do you think technology has taken over our lives too much? And again, I suppose, obviously feel free to approach this any way you want, but perhaps from, again, the lens of your subject area. What do we think about technology in general? And is that perhaps harming our ability to make a better world, or is it a positive? What do we think about that?
My initial reaction was yes. But then I just paused for a minute to think about it, because not all technology is bad, of course, but certainly we're all online so much. Maybe it does harm our connection with the real world. So if I'm thinking about literature and art, we might go on TikTok and scroll through a couple of videos rather than reading a book or, you know, creating something. So there is almost that disconnect. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing as long as we don't do it too much. It's about having a balance. And certainly from my perspective, sometimes I just get out a pen and a piece of paper because my eyes hurt from looking at a screen too much. So I think there's also the health aspect as well, but I suppose that's only if you're spending too long on a computer all day for work or whatever it is you may be doing. So yeah, I think it's a balance, certainly, yeah.
And I think just often, you know, social media in particular is discussed in quite a negative aspect. But I think it is also important, I would argue, to remember that there are a lot of positive aspects. So when you were saying about, you know, you might be scrolling through your TikTok feed, but you may discover new pieces of art or literature if you have kind of curated your feed to go that way.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess perhaps that's kind of the key aspect of it, is that you want to kind of use and mold the technology in a good way.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then Simon, I suppose, sort of to give you an opportunity as well to talk about technology and language. How do you think?
I'll try.
Has it taken over? Is it a good thing, bad thing? What?
So again, there's a lot of utility there. We can use things like, again, machine translation, or we talked a little bit about some of the uses of AI for language learning, for communication, for sort of simple translation tasks. And there is a lot of utility there. I think something that's quite interesting about, to sort of broaden things to language and culture, is the way that technology has allowed bits of language and culture to sort of move independently of people. So again, one of the things that we're looking at here with regards to Korean is the way that Korean words have come into English with Korean media, but not necessarily with a large movement of Korean people, or the way that the words take on a life of their own and move around through sort of social networks or through sort of computer-mediated means. So yes, it's everywhere. It has a large effect, but for me personally, the jury is still out on whether it's a negative or a net positive.
And finally, Tianxia.
Taking over, I think it's a personal choice. It's also about self-discipline. You can choose to become either a slave or a master of the high tech. And for my study, sometimes I need to read through 50 different research papers in one day. And without the technology we have today, obviously, I need to probably spend 50 days to first travel to London, to find the library, to find some books and find the right chapter, the right line. Then I probably need to fly to America to go to a different library, find a book, again, do the same thing. So it can definitely help us, but it's also about self-control. If you spend way too much time looking at useless things, and it might not do you any good, but I'm not very good at self-control myself, so.
None of us are, really. I think that's fine. Okay, so thank you everyone for your input on that. So to sort of look at the second poll question, which was based on your presentation, Harriet. So we asked everybody, do you think drawing and writing stories can help people to understand big problems better? So this is also overwhelmingly positive.
Thank goodness.
We have 81% in favour to say yes, and 19%. A good, sort of again. So I guess any sort of thoughts or comments on that from yourself?
That's super interesting because I'm interested for the people who said no, what their reasoning was, because I think art. If you think of art and literature as a vehicle, like I said, you can mold it in any way you want. It could be positive, but interestingly, like you asked before, can it be used for evil? So I guess maybe that's where people are thinking it could be used for bad. But yeah, I think that's generally an interesting response, and I'm glad to see that it was, for the most part, positive.
Well, the sort of the negative, I should have perhaps clarified the answer, was to say no, they're just for fun. So it wasn't necessarily focusing perhaps on the negatives.
Okay, yeah.
It was just sort of, which I think is an interesting
Just for
viewpoint,
fun.
actually.
Yeah, no, that is true. So I'm not an artist, but I do art for fun. So I guess, yeah, it depends on your individual perspective.
Yeah. Well, as with all of these things, I think in all of these questions, there isn't really any right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
That's the idea of us discussing and sharing opinions and hopefully opening our minds to other opinions that other people might have. I think that's the most important.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, and then our third question. Should we use more robots and computer programs to help us to learn in school? So this was following your presentation, Chenchi. And this says, option 1, yes, they can make learning more fun, 77% in favour. And then no, they might be too distracting, is the other 23%. So I don't know whether you have a personal opinion on this. I'm guessing you're probably in the yes camp.
Yeah, but I admire you for saying no, because you definitely have much better self-controlling skills than I do. You think it might be distracting. That's also true. It can be quite distracting. It's about using it in the right, if there's a right way. And I guess it's about how teachers and adults decide how we can bring them into. We're already using them in the quizzes and some online learning platforms. But another thing to think about is, maybe it's not here in the UK, but around the world, there are many schools that have no access to internet or computers when they're doing any educational work. So we might also think about that. What's going to happen to them if we try to bring AI into the study?
Yeah. And then our final poll question, which is based on your presentation, Simon, is learning a new language a superpower for making friends around the world? We have 72% said yes, and 27% said that they don't believe it is important for making friends.
Ooh. Well, so I will share something that went viral on the dark corners of the internet that I hang out on. It was someone explaining to an internet acquaintance that the reason that their internet acquaintance spoke English to them is because it was the only language they spoke. But the reason that they spoke English to their internet acquaintance was because English was the only language that their acquaintance spoke. Sure, there are languages that are very widely spoken and that will allow you to meet and speak to a lot of people. But that will really just allow you to communicate. I think for a sort of deeper level of real interpersonal connection, even sort of a token amount of another language is always very much appreciated, I think.
Yeah, I think your little story you shared there was really nice, because I think that does show the commitment you as a person have to trying to get to know this person and to trying to learn about their culture, their language. And yeah, no, I think that is very, very important there. So perhaps by itself it's not enough. I think I may
Absolutely.
I would potentially agree with that, though I would also agree that it's incredibly important and you should therefore do it. But yeah, I think there are other elements to it, like you say. We have a follow-up question based on the polls results. This is coming from the Belvedere Academy again. Hello again, Belvedere Academy. What is more beneficial for learning, human teachers or computer programs? Which is quite the question. As a human teacher, I would argue, I think both of them are important and play certain roles. And I think we've actually touched on this a little bit in the various discussions we've had around artificial intelligence. And I know you've been particularly keen to emphasize, Harriet, which I do agree with, this idea of, often art and literature can be very human creations, that kind of creativity and sort of personal experience, which you're not going to get from. So I think I would argue in a learning environment as well that, like the enthusiasm that I can bring when I talk about maths, I don't think you can get from a computer.
No.
So yeah, I don't know if any of you have any thoughts or anything you want to add in response to that. So what is more beneficial for learning, human teachers or computer programs?
I think we all know what I think.
Yes.
But human teachers, as somebody who teaches as well, I think you can learn from the way your teachers have learned things. So, for example, your teacher may have a way of explaining things or a way of learning something that you might not be able to necessarily just pick out of a computer. For example, if you're learning how to read Shakespeare, your teacher might have a way of making that accessible to you that, you know, a computer program might not automatically come up with. So just having these personal touches, I think, is really important, from my perspective at least anyway. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I could get into that, but I do think that we can have different tools for different tasks.
No, for sure, yeah. I just mean in terms of, if you could only have one, I would always choose.
Let's not be so restrictive to us. I think
Well, it was a either or question, wasn't it?
Either or
so
question. I suppose let's think of it in the sense of they are both required, but like
yeah. No, definitely. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I would agree, like, you can use tools, but you always need that human element. But anyway, sorry, carry on.
No, I mean, I just, again, to drag everything back to language learning, I think if you are looking at learning vocabulary, then you might want something like space repetition software, or frankly, even a pen and paper list is still technology, right? But then when you're looking at learning sort of how to actually interact with a person, perhaps you'll want a person there to interact with.
Yeah. And finally,
Well, at the moment, I think the importance of human teachers and robots is probably 90 versus 10. But in the future, I can't imagine 30-70 or 20-80. That's my personal opinion.
okay. And we're pretty much out of time, but I want to give you all a final opportunity for our question of the day, which was, can we build a better world? So in a sentence or two, does each of you have like a summing up point or a simple yes or no? Can we build a better world? What do we think?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're all in unanimous agreement. I am also a yes, so that's everyone who voted, all four of us here on the panel, which, so, you know, again, we're all feeling optimistic about this, and hopefully we've given you a lot to think about and to discuss. So thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for all of you for watching. That just leaves me to mention the reason we are actually here today, of course, the Oxplore Hackathon, which is the competition that is being launched today. So full details will be available either through your teachers or through the online website. But in brief, this is a competition for Year 7 and Year 8 in state schools in the UK. And basically, we want to hear your ideas on how to solve problems and create new inventions. And to stress, you don't actually need to know anything about computers or coding. We just want creative ideas around the theme. And if you're ready to take on the challenge of the hackathon and work with a university mentor to bring your ideas to life, then do have your teacher sign up, and we will send the link in a follow-up email after this event. The deadline to sign up will be December the 20th, and the work will start in the new year. So if you've enjoyed this discussion and you would like to think about this question more and take part in the hackathon, then please do mention this to your teachers. Teachers, look out for the link in the follow-up email. So that just leaves me to say thank you once again to all of our panel. Thank you to all of you for watching. I've been Dr. Tom Crawford, and goodbye, I guess.